Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep into strategies for strong parenting based on Amy Morin's book, 13 Things Mentally Strong Parents Don't Do. I was at the park recently and saw this parent just totally losing it with their kid. And it really got me thinking, how can we handle those tough moments better? Morin is a therapist and foster parent, so she's got some really interesting insights to share.
It is fascinating how Morin uses her own experiences, right? She really highlights the downsides of a victim mentality when it comes to parenting. And she argues that this outlook can actually be kind of passed down from parent to child without even realizing it.
I find that so interesting. How does that even happen?
We'll take the story of Leanne, for example. She was bullied as a kid, and because of that, she was constantly warning her own children about how mean other people could be. And without meaning to, she instilled this sense of helplessness in them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They started to see bullying as just an inevitable part of life, something they couldn't really do anything about.
That reminds me of Martin Seligman's research on learned helplessness.
Hmm.
You know that experiment with the dogs and the electric shocks?
Exactly.
They eventually just gave up, even when they could escape.
It's a psychological phenomenon that can definitely show up in kids too. So instead of dwelling on their struggles, we should be teaching them how to solve problems, giving them those skills.
So instead of just offering sympathy, which could actually make them feel more like a victim, we should focus on helping them take action. Helping them believe they can overcome obstacles.
Yes, exactly. Morin gives this really interesting example of a mother, Holly, who was always super sympathetic to her daughter Lily's complaints about school.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, and it actually made Lily's poor me attitude even worse.
So it's like she was getting rewarded for feeling like a victim. So how can we support our kids without accidentally making that helplessness worse?
Morin suggests starting with choices even for really little kids, like age-appropriate choices, of course. Something as simple as asking, do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt, can make a big difference.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Gives them a feeling of control while still having boundaries.
Right, so by offering limited but acceptable choices, we're actually helping them develop their decision-making skills. And as they get older, this can evolve into helping them see the silver lining in tough situations. It's not about denying their struggles, but helping them learn from those experiences.
Makes sense. Let's talk about teenagers now. They often have a lot of intense emotions and need more attention. Morin suggests this can lead to feelings of being a victim, especially with social media.
She makes a really good point about the dangers of vague complaints online, like saying things like, my life is so unfair. We need to teach teenagers how to express their needs in a healthy way, focusing on specific issues and finding solutions.
She talks about Jim Abbott, the baseball player, who was born without a right hand and still had this amazing career, even pitched a no-hitter in the major leagues.
It's such a powerful example, right? Jim Abbott's story shows us that focusing on what you can do instead of dwelling on limitations can lead to incredible things.
And speaking of challenges, let's talk about parental guilt. It's something a lot of parents struggle with.
Marin makes a really important distinction between appropriate guilt, the kind that pushes us to be better parents, and unhealthy guilt, which leads to bad choices.
Social media can be a breeding ground for unhealthy guilt.
Yeah.
With all those perfect families and everything, it's easy to feel like you're not good enough.
The key is to remember that good enough is truly enough. There's no such thing as being a perfect parent. Trying to be perfect just sets you up for failure.
How do we avoid raising kids with inflated egos and a sense of entitlement then? It's a tricky balance.
Morin cautions against giving kids too much praise, especially when it's not really earned. She says it can create these inflated self-beliefs that actually hold them back in the long run.
She tells the story of Billy, who was 8 years old and got way too much praise even when he didn't deserve it. And guess what? It completely backfired. He started acting out, being disrespectful, and having trouble getting along with other kids.
Billy's experience really shows us how important it is to give genuine praise that focuses on effort and character, not just superficial stuff.
So it's about teaching them to be humble, empathetic, and kind.
Exactly. And a big part of that is teaching them to think about how their actions affect others. Morin has this great tool she calls this someone else's shoes questions. They help kids think about the impact of what they do.
Can you give me an example? How would a parent use those questions?
Let's say a child hurts a friend. A parent could ask, how do you think your friend felt when you did that? Or, what would you have done if you were in their shoes? It helps them develop empathy and take responsibility for their actions.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's definitely a challenge to find that balance between giving kids freedom and still maintaining control, especially as they get older.
Morin connects a lack of boundaries to a whole bunch of problems. poor self-control health issues, trouble in school, and even risky behavior. Yeah, it can be serious. She talks about this teenager, Clarissa, whose parents always gave in to her demands. They basically gave up control, and Clarissa's behavior got so bad that she even threatened to hurt herself to get what she wanted. It's a scary story.
It is.
But it shows how important it is to have clear communication and a healthy power dynamic in the family.
Our language can play a big part in that power dynamic,
Bro,
too.
oh, absolutely. Even small changes in how we say things can make a big difference. Like instead of saying, we'll talk about it when a child asks for something, you could say, you can explain your reasons, and then your father and I will discuss it. It reinforces the idea that the parents are ultimately the ones making the decisions.
That's such a subtle but important difference. It reminds me of all the fear that seems to be everywhere in parenting these days. All the news stories about stranger, danger, and everything. It makes the world feel like a scary place.
Morin argues that this kind of fear-based parenting can actually harm a child's development. She brings up the case of Lenore Skenazy, who is called America's worst mom, for letting her 9-year-old son ride the subway alone. It sparked this huge debate about how much danger kids are really in versus how much danger we perceive.
Yeah, I remember that story. It was pretty controversial.
It was, but it's important to realize that being overprotective can actually prevent kids from developing resilience, independence, and even the ability to manage their own anxiety.
It's like we're accidentally raising a generation of kids who are afraid to go out into the world.
Exactly. To combat this, Morin talks about the idea of a fear ladder.
A fear ladder.
Yeah, it's basically helping kids face their fears one step at a time.
So instead of avoiding something they're afraid of completely, you break it down into smaller steps.
Exactly. Let's say you have a child who's afraid of dogs. Instead of throwing them into a room full of puppies, you start by showing them pictures of dogs. Then maybe you watch some videos together. Then you observe dogs from a distance and eventually work your way up to a supervised interaction.
So it's about gradually building their confidence and showing them that they can handle more than they think they can.
Right. And remember, the goal isn't to get rid of fear altogether. Fear is normal. It's about teaching them to be courageous to do things even when they're afraid.
I like that. Our society puts so much emphasis on achievement that sometimes we forget about the importance of being okay with imperfection and learning from our mistakes.
Moran connects this fear of making mistakes to overprotective parenting. We try to protect our kids from failing, but it can actually backfire.
She talks about Mason, a boy who learned to hide his mistakes because he was so afraid of disappointing his parents. And it got so bad that he couldn't even admit his mistakes to himself.
It's a sad story. Mason's experience shows us the dangers of trying to be perfect all the time. It can stifle creativity, discourage risk-taking, and ultimately hold people back from growing.
So how do we change our perspective? How do we teach kids that mistakes are actually valuable learning opportunities?
It starts with us. We need to be comfortable admitting our own mistakes and showing them that it's okay to mess up and learn from it.
So we need to lead by example.
Exactly.
Got it.
Morin also encourages focusing on effort rather than just outcomes. So instead of praising a child for getting an A on a test, you acknowledge how hard they worked and how dedicated they were regardless of the grade.
That makes sense. So you're showing them that their worth isn't tied to their performance. It takes the pressure off of being perfect.
Yes, exactly. And it's also important to recognize when a child is feeling overwhelmed and adjust our expectations accordingly. If they're showing signs of burnout or losing interest in something they used to love, it might be time to step back and see if we're pushing them too hard.
Sometimes the best thing we can do is teach them to take care of themselves and know their limits.
I agree.
Finally, let's talk about the importance of living by our values and making sure our parenting aligns with those values. It's easy to lose sight of what really matters when we're caught up in the day-to-day chaos of parenting.
Morin uses this really thought-provoking story about Kyle, a high-achieving student who got caught cheating, to illustrate this point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it turned out that his parents had accidentally emphasized achievement above everything else. They basically sent the message that success was the most important thing, even if it meant being dishonest.
That's a good reminder to regularly check in with ourselves and make sure we're not accidentally sending the wrong messages to our kids.
It's not enough to just talk about our values. We have to live them out in our everyday lives. Making sure our actions match what we say is important.
It's about creating a family culture where things like honesty, kindness, and respect aren't just words. They're guiding principles that shape how we interact with each other and the world around us.
I love that.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. We've covered so much valuable information about mentally strong parenting. Before we move on, let's pause for a moment and give our listeners a quick recap of the key points.
Of course. Here are 10 important takeaways from our exploration of Amy Morin's 13 Things Mentally Strong Parents Don't Do. Number one, mentally strong parents teach their kids to be problem solvers, encouraging them to be proactive instead of adopting a victim mentality. Number two, giving kids choices, even small ones, from a young age helps them develop decision-making skills and a sense of independence. Number three, teenagers need guidance on how to express their needs and concerns in a healthy way, focusing on solutions instead of just complaining. Number four, parents should be aware of their own guilt and avoid comparing themselves to others or trying to be perfect. Number five, authentic praise that focuses on effort, character, and genuine accomplishments is much more valuable than excessive praise that inflates a child's ego. Number six, teaching children to consider the perspectives and feelings of others is crucial for developing empathy, kindness, and a strong moral compass. Number seven, setting clear boundaries and limits helps children develop self-control, responsibility, and a healthy understanding of authority. Number eight, encouraging courage and giving kids opportunities to face their fears, perhaps using techniques like a fear ladder, helps them build resilience and overcome anxieties. Number nine, embracing imperfection and seeing mistakes as opportunities for growth fosters a healthy self-image and a growth mindset. And finally, number 10, regularly reflecting on your own values and making sure your parenting actions are consistent with those values while also communicating openly with your children creates a strong foundation of shared values.
Wow, what a fantastic summary. It really captures the essence of raising well-rounded individuals who are prepared not only for success, but also for the inevitable challenges that life throws their way.
You said it. Parenting is about giving our kids the mental and emotional tools they need to handle whatever comes their way, not shielding them from every bit of discomfort.
You've given our listeners a lot to think about, and I'm sure they're already considering how to apply these insights to their own families.
I hope so. I'll leave them with this final thought. Maybe the greatest gift we can give our children isn't a life free from pain and disappointment, but the inner strength and resilience to overcome those challenges and become the best versions of themselves.
That's a really powerful message. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll continue our exploration of Amy Morin's book in the next part.
So, building on this idea of resilience, Morin suggests we rethink our urge to protect our kids from discomfort.
That's interesting. Can you say more about that?
It's natural to want to shield our kids from pain and disappointment, right? But doing that might actually stop them from learning how to cope with challenges. The challenges that are just a part of life.
So by trying to make everything comfortable for them, are we kind of setting them up for a rude awakening when they face real-world problems?
Exactly. Morin argues that allowing children to experience some discomfort, appropriate for their age. Of course, things like losing a game, dealing with social conflicts, or setbacks in school can actually make them emotionally stronger.
I get that. But how do we know where to draw the line? How can parents tell the difference between healthy challenges and unnecessary pain?
It definitely takes careful thought and an understanding of each child's individual abilities. We're not talking about exposing kids to trauma or danger,
Well,
but everyday disappointments and frustrations are just a normal part of life.
and if we always rush in to save them from those experiences, are we saying that they're not capable of handling things on their own?
Yep, it's all about finding that balance between supporting them and letting them develop their own ways of coping.
Morin says that our own anxieties as parents can sometimes make it hard to see our children's true capabilities.
Oh, absolutely. Studies actually show that anxious parents often underestimate what their kids can handle. They tend to imagine the worst and overestimate the risks in everyday situations.
So how do we as parents work on our own anxieties and avoid putting them onto our children?
It starts with being aware of our own fears and how they might be affecting our parenting choices. Once we're aware of that, we can start making more conscious decisions.
So it's about learning to trust our kids more, right? Giving them the space to figure things out and learn from their experiences.
Right. We want to empower them to be problem solvers, not people who feel helpless when things get tough.
Morin also goes into discipline, specifically avoiding power struggles and unhealthy shortcuts.
This is where things get really interesting. Morin says that giving kids too much power can actually be bad for them.
I'm curious about that. How can giving them more control have negative consequences?
Well, when kids are in control, they're often driven by what they want in the moment, which might not be what's best for them in the long run.
Like they might choose to stay up late playing video games instead of getting enough sleep. Or they might choose junk food over healthy food, even though they know better.
Exactly. This lack of boundaries can really affect them in a lot of ways, impacting their self-control, their health, how they do in school, and even their ability to have good relationships later on.
Morin mentions this statistic that really surprised me. Permissive parents are 5 times more likely to let their kids watch more than 4 hours of TV a day.
Yeah, it's a serious reminder that our choices as parents have a big impact on our children's well-being.
So given the problems with both too much control and too much permissiveness, how can parents find that healthy balance without becoming authoritarian?
It's about being assertive, setting clear limits, and sticking to those limits even when kids push back.
I appreciate how Morin emphasizes the importance of language in reinforcing that power dynamic.
Oh, for sure. Little changes in how we phrase things can make a difference. For example, instead of saying, "We need to clean up this mess," you could say, "It's time to tidy up your toys." This puts the responsibility right on the child.
That's a good point. It avoids blaming everyone and makes it clear who's responsible for the task.
Exactly. It encourages kids to take responsibility for what they do and understand that their choices have consequences.
This idea of avoiding shortcuts really struck a chord with me. It's so easy in today's world to just want to make things easier for our kids.
I know it's tempting, but Morin makes a strong case for teaching kids the importance of delaying gratification and working towards their goals, even when it's hard.
She argues that kids who learn to resist those unhealthy shortcuts develop resilience, perseverance, and a stronger work ethic. Those are qualities that will benefit them throughout their lives.
Right. It's about instilling in them the idea that true satisfaction comes from putting in the effort and achieving something, not just from instant gratification.
I thought her comparison of mood boosters versus shortcuts was really helpful.
Tell me more about that.
She describes a mood booster as something that benefits a child's well-being in the long run, even if it takes some effort in the short term. Like studying for a test might not be fun, but it's a mood booster because it leads to a sense of accomplishment and success in school.
As opposed to a shortcut, which might feel good in the moment, but could ultimately hurt their long-term goals.
Exactly. If a child is feeling anxious and we let them skip school, it might seem like we're being kind, but we're actually reinforcing avoidance and preventing them from learning how to cope.
I see what you mean. It's crucial to think about the long-term impact of our choices, even when we're under pressure to make things easier in the moment.
This emphasis on perseverance fits in perfectly with Morin's focus on living by our values. It's not just about achieving success, but achieving it in a way that aligns with what we believe in.
Absolutely. We want to raise kids who are not only capable, but also ethical, compassionate, and driven by a sense of purpose that goes beyond personal gain.
Morin uses this really interesting example of a parent who finds out their child is cheating in school.
That's every parent's nightmare. But it forces us to look at the messages we're sending, even if we don't mean to.
In this case, the parents had focused so much on achievement that their child felt pressured to succeed, even if it meant being dishonest.
It's a reminder that our actions speak louder than words. If we constantly emphasize things like grades awards and what other people think, our kids might start to believe that those things are more important than honesty, kindness, and hard work.
So we can't just talk about our values.
Hmm.
We have to actually live them out in our daily lives and make sure our parenting reflects those values.
Precisely. We want to create a family culture where integrity, empathy, and respect aren't just abstract ideas. They're the principles that guide how we treat each other and the world around us.
We've covered a lot of ground in this discussion, but before we move on, I want to touch on another essential part of mentally strong parenting, emotional intelligence.
Yes, that's becoming such a hot topic these days in parenting and in the workplace too. And for good reason.
Morin argues that teaching kids to understand and manage their emotions is crucial for their overall well-being and for their ability to build healthy relationships.
She emphasizes helping kids develop a rich vocabulary for emotions, going beyond just happy and sad to include a wider range of feelings like frustration, disappointment, anxiety, and pride.
Right, it's not just about labeling emotions, but giving them healthy ways to express and cope with those emotions.
Exactly. We need to help them understand that it's okay to feel all kinds of emotions, but not every behavior is acceptable.
So like it's normal to feel angry, but it's not okay to hit someone when you're angry.
Right. We need to give them tools to handle their emotions in a healthy way, whether it's through deep breathing, taking a break to calm down, or talking about their feelings.
Morin also stresses the importance of modeling emotional intelligence ourselves. We need to show our kids how we manage our own emotions in a healthy way.
Oh, absolutely. Kids are like little sponges. They pick up on everything we do.
Right.
If we're always yelling, suppressing our feelings, or reacting without thinking, they're more likely to do the same.
So it's about being mindful of our own emotional state and making conscious choices about how we react even when we're stressed out.
Exactly. We need to be that calm presence in the midst of all the chaos, that steady hand to guide them through the tough times.
I love that image. It really shows how much we influence our children's emotional world as parents.
It does. And it brings us back to that main message of building mental strength in our kids. It's not about protecting them from every bad feeling, but about giving them the skills to handle life's challenges with resilience, grace, and a deep understanding of themselves and others.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I'm really feeling inspired to put these ideas into practice in my own parenting. Before we wrap up this part, I want to shift our focus to something that's particularly relevant for parents of teenagers letting go and getting them ready for adulthood.
Ah, yes. That stage can be both exciting and nerve-wracking for parents, right?
Totally. We spend years nurturing, guiding, and protecting our kids, and then suddenly it's time to step back and trust them to make their own way in the world.
Morin talks about the importance of gradually giving teenagers more responsibility, giving them chances to practice making decisions and being independent before they're fully on their own.
So it's like a gradual handover of control, letting them take more ownership of their lives.
Exactly. It can start with small things, like letting them manage their own schedules, make their own appointments, or handle their own money.
And as they show they can handle it and their confidence grows, we can give them more independence.
Morin also highlights the importance of helping teens develop self-reliance, teaching them how to solve problems, advocate for themselves, and deal with challenges without always running to us for help.
So we're empowering them to be resourceful, resilient, and able to stand on their own 2 feet.
Exactly. And that means resisting the urge to jump in and fix every problem for them.
I know it's hard, but I realize now that it can actually rob them of valuable learning opportunities.
It does. It tells them that we don't believe they can handle things themselves.
So it's all about finding that balance between offering support and letting go, allowing them to make mistakes, learn, and ultimately grow into confident, capable adults.
I agree. This process can be both difficult and really rewarding for parents. We have to give up some control, but we also get to see our kids blossoming into the amazing people they were meant to be.
It's a good reminder that our goal as parents isn't to create mini-me's, but to nurture our children's unique talents and help them find their own paths in life.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's about guiding them, supporting them, and then watching them soar with a mix of pride and maybe a little bit of bittersweet nostalgia.
This deep dive has been packed with wisdom and practical advice. I know our listeners are ready for that 10-point summary we promised, but before we do that, I want to touch on one more crucial aspect of preparing our kids for the real world, teaching them about responsibility. It's about equipping them with the understanding that their actions have consequences and that they have a role to play in making the world a better place.
It really is the foundation of becoming a responsible adult, isn't it? It's about recognizing that our choices affect other people doing what we're supposed to do and actively working to make our communities and the world a better place.
Morin suggests starting early, even with toddlers. Giving them age-appropriate chores and tasks can help them develop a sense of ownership.
It creates this shared responsibility for keeping things running smoothly at home and in the community.
Exactly. And as they grow up, we can give them more complex and important responsibilities. It gives them a chance to practice making decisions, solving problems, and managing their time.
Morin is a big advocate for letting natural consequences happen because they teach kids about responsibility in a really powerful way.
I'm intrigued by that idea. Can you explain it a little more?
Sure, natural consequences mean letting kids experience the logical outcomes of their choices, even if it means they face some discomfort or disappointment. So let's say a child forgets their lunchbox. We resist the urge to rescue them by bringing it to school.
So they have to deal with being hungry or maybe borrowing lunch money?
Exactly. It might seem tough at first, but it teaches them a valuable lesson about planning ahead and taking responsibility for their actions.
And it avoids those power struggles and resentment that can build up when we always try to protect them from the consequences of their choices.
Exactly. It helps them develop accountability and self-reliance, which are so important for success in life.
Morin also talked about the importance of financial responsibility, even for kids.
You're right. It's never too early to start teaching them about money. Teaching kids about earning, saving, and spending wisely sets them up for a good financial future.
I love the idea of giving kids an allowance. It's a concrete way for them to practice budgeting and making their own financial decisions.
Allowances give them hands-on experience with managing money, and it reinforces the importance of patience and being responsible with spending.
And it definitely cuts down on those constant requests for toys and candy.
That's for sure. When we empower kids to make their own financial decisions within reason, it gives them a sense of independence and allows them to learn from their own experiences.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. We've learned so much from Amy Morin's book, and I know our listeners are waiting for that 10-point summary we promised.
Number one, mentally strong parents raise problem solvers. They help their kids develop a proactive mindset instead of seeing themselves as victims. Number two, giving choices, even little ones from an early age, helps children learn to make decisions and feel more in control. Number three, teenagers need help learning how to express their needs and concerns in a constructive way. It's about finding solutions, not just complaining. Number four, parents need to be aware of their own guilt and avoid comparing themselves to others or trying to achieve an impossible standard of perfection. Number five, genuine praise that focuses on effort, character, and real accomplishments is way more valuable than excessive praise that just inflates a child's ego. Number six, teaching children to consider other people's perspectives and feelings is essential for raising kind, respectful, and morally grounded individuals. Number seven, setting clear boundaries and limits is crucial for helping children develop self-control, a sense of responsibility, and a healthy respect for authority. Number eight, encouraging courage and giving kids chances to face their fears, maybe using techniques like a fear ladder, helps them build resilience and overcome anxiety. Number nine, embracing imperfection and seeing mistakes as opportunities to learn fosters a positive self-image and a growth mindset. And finally, number 10, regularly reflecting on your own values, making sure your parenting aligns with those values, and communicating openly with your children creates a solid foundation of shared values within the family.
That was a fantastic summary. It covers such a wide range of parenting wisdom, from building resilience to fostering emotional intelligence, teaching responsibility, and preparing our kids for the real world.
It really highlights the overall goal of raising well-rounded people who are ready not only to succeed, but to face life's challenges with strength and grace.
Before we wrap up, I want to emphasize one last takeaway that really resonated with me. It's the idea that our main goal as parents shouldn't be to protect our children from all discomfort and disappointment, but to empower them with the inner strength and resilience to overcome those challenges and become the best versions of themselves.
I love that. We're not here to create a perfect path for our children, but to give them the tools and encouragement to carve their own paths, even if those paths are a little messy or challenging sometimes.
Right. It's about letting go of the illusion of control and embracing the beautiful, messy, unpredictable adventure of parenthood with trust, love, and a deep belief in our children's ability to thrive.
What a perfect way to end our discussion. I think we've given our listeners plenty to think about today.
We have, and we want to thank everyone for joining us on this deep dive into mentally strong parenting. Remember, you're doing an amazing job, and we're here to support you every step of the way.
Until next time, may your parenting journey be full of joy, connection, and an unshakable belief in your children's incredible potential.